I grew up listening to, you know what I mean?
And sometimes sidechain has an effect that, like, sometimes, like, there's been a few songs, granted, very far and few between, where, like, I get to the mix bus and I purposely compress the shit out of it, limit the shit out of it, so I have this pumping, this sidechain-esque feel from the mix bus. So it's not actually sidechain, but I, like, purposefully make it pump, and that's what the song needed. So it totally depends. It's just
source dependent. And I just one last question of, you know, on the technical level. You know, you say you mastered this mix that you did. You know, at what point are you doing mastering stuff if you're mastering your own mixes? At the end.
At the very end.
And is it ample, or is it just a touch, you know?
So it's always different for me. I'm always trying different things. I am extremely chaotic good. And I don't even have bad habits, let alone habits in general.
Not having habits is, wow, amazing.
I'm teasing. No, I have a lot of order in my life. I'm trying to cope with my chaoticness, but
I'm the other way around. I'm trying to embrace chaos.
But my mix bus is always changing. My process is always changing. I can actually tell you exactly what I did in what order on this one, because I looked at it right before we started the podcast. I did tilt EQ with a touch of saturation, although the headroom on that thing is really low, so it doesn't always work on mix bus stuff. Tilt EQ with like a nudge of that, and a shelf on that tilt EQ. There's a 1K shelf. I love putting that 1K shelf on a lot of mixes recently. I did the bass boost, treble boost, mid-range bump. All I did was put the UAD legacy version, the free legacy version of Pultec EQP 1A on the mix bus. I may have added a little bit of low end or some mid-range top end. I don't really remember, but I sometimes often, and it doesn't always work, but in this case it did. I put it on. I hope this doesn't condemn me from ever getting sponsored by them, but I'm not a huge Waves fan. But in this scenario, the Waves API 2500 has a tone, especially in the analog setting. It does have a tone, let alone at that point, I'm not worried about. I don't want to hear the compressor. Like, at no point in my mix bus phase do I ever want to hear the compressor. But I do things for the tone and for the saturation of it. So the API 2500 does this like little weird, cool mid-range scoop thing that I really like in the Waves thing. That worked well for this song. Again, very intentional. I probably tried a few other things. And then Invisible Limiter, which is sold by a Japanese company, so I'm a little prideful. I forgot what the name of the company. I forgot. That's what that grunt was for. I just totally forgot.
Was it like Tokyo Dawn, maybe?
No, it's not Tokyo Dawn. No, it's not Tokyo Dawn.
They're not even Japanese?
No, they're not Japanese. Tokyo. They're European, if I'm not mistaken.
Man.
But it's called the Invisible Limiter.
Cool, I've never heard of it. I'll check it out.
And then finish it off. I usually do double limiting, and I do the heavy work with the Invisible Limiter because it sounds good. It's probably my favorite limiter for heavy. By heavy, I mean like -2 to 4 max. And then when I get to my final limiter, which is Oxford, I use the Oxford limiter. I'm hitting -0.5, -1 max. And I'm still hitting like -7, -8 LUFS. Because again, I use a lot of saturation and compression for the saturation, for the tonality, during the mix. So by the time I get to the end, I don't have to do much.
Yeah, it's there, it's loud, it's proud, it's saturated.
And I do it all at the end. I know some people mix into a mix bus. I don't mix into a limiter. I don't do that at all.
But you do mix into your stereo bus processing.
I do not mix into my stereo bus processing.
Any of that?
Nothing. It's fully blank.
It's like naked, and then you add it all up.
Yeah.
Oh,
and
cool.
it is part of my sound. So even if I send it off to a mastering engineer, all I would do is take off that Oxford limiter.
Right.
I wouldn't even take off the invisible limiter. That's part of my sound.
Oh yeah. I totally get that. So you basically mix without anything on the stereo bus. Then you add your stereo bus processing, make sure it's hitting how you want it, and then you either leave it or send it off to mastering with just the invisible limiter printed on.
Absolutely. Yeah, and that changes all the time. Like some years or some sessions, I have almost nothing. I have a limiter and that's it. And some older sessions, I have a lot going on where I'm actually using like 9 of the 10 inserts. But in this case, I'm kind of in the middle ground right now where I use like 3 or 4 and then my limiters.
Yeah, my stereo bus has been expanding recently, but I feel like it adds like that depth, and then you kind of, if you add like a Pultec kind of EQ at the end of it, your compressor and stuff, and it just lifts up the heavy stuff, and then maybe you even add another like a surgical EQ to kind of get rid of some of the extra sub that gets added and make it a little bit more balanced. Like
Absolutely.
Those little things can really make you're almost pre-mastering, and it can make a big difference.
Absolutely.
getting close. At least, like I have like a good relationship with my mastering engineer, so like I trust that he's going to do what I want him to do, or if not, I'll communicate otherwise. But like the closer it gets to the finished product, the better it is, because then like you kind of were saying, like there's less of a chance that you're not going to be happy at the end.
Yeah, it's the mix bus thing. I think the big thing that you said is I try to get my mix to 100% without my mix bus stuff to begin with. I do as close as I can. But the one thing that I do pay attention to, that I purposefully add, and there's not a single tool that does it, is depth. When I get to, what I do is, and how I kind of explain it to my interns and my students is kind of like, I'm kind of separating the vocal is still on top, but the vocal is a little bit further on top than I want it to be, and I squish it together. So it still feels on top, but it's like getting a big fat sandwich and then squishing it so it's easier to consume. So, and I get this depth, which comes from, for me, I feel like I have a feeling, an inkling that depth comes from transience. So like when things poke out and then come back in. So like in some case, like the LUFS, I don't think it's perfect, but like the dynamic range of a song, as well as like the space in between, the cohesiveness. I hate using the word glue, but there's really a sense of glue that can come from mix bus compression that I really like. Although I get my mix to 100% without any of it, I am planning on putting that stuff in by the time I get to it. My real 100% is after I do my mix bus process.
Yeah, it's interesting. It's like backwards of the way I guess most people, or not most people, but I'm looking at it, I'm sure a lot of other people, whereas I kind of will mix into the stereo bus because I know it gives me that kind of depth, and then just, I guess there's a little bit less work to do, but you want the extra work, and then it's just like, let's seal the deal,
And granted, I only spend like 5-10 minutes on just that section alone. It's usually pretty quick. I'm not overthinking about it at that point. And I refuse to do it myself. If I feel like I'm losing objectivity, I'll give it a day before I come back to it to do that.
Time is the best way to get more objective. I'm with you. Yeah, dude. Well, this has been so fun. I feel like we could schmooze all day, but eventually I got to go to sleep and you got to get back to work. But a couple more questions before we wrap it. I have like my final question of the show, but just talking about like creative energies. We all have days where we're super in the zone and we want to work and we want to get our hands dirty. And there's days where we're less, excited to get working, get mixing, get producing. What do you do to kind of keep yourself in a good creative spirit, good energy?
Ooh, good question. Number one. First off, hold on. Actually, preface before this. I don't think I have the perfect answer, but I think I'm slowly discovering what the right answers are for me, and which may be different for anybody that's listening, right? But for me, number one is sleep. Getting enough sleep. I'm done with those 100-hour work weeks and going to school full time. I barely work like 30 to 40 if I have to. Like I sleep well. I try to sleep well. Number two, I make sure to have creative endeavors outside of music. Number three, I try to enjoy music for the enjoyment of music when I do listen to music. Number four, I'm always doing things like I'm always seeking self-progression. I'm very chaotic by nature. So when I do things like make my bed, unnecessary. I think making my bed is like wiping my butt before I shit. It doesn't make sense to me, but I do it for the sake of like I'm starting my day. One thing that's really weird and specific for me, before I start working, I have to put on socks. It changes my mindset. I don't know why it is. So I put on socks because I don't wear shoes in the house. Again, we're Japanese, right? I put on socks and then I walk into the office. This office has to be clean. There's no kids. Well, kids are allowed here, but not without adult supervision. This room has to be clean. Like I have things that are order for me, and I do self-engage in things that I love. Like I love anime, right? And I love watching movies, and I love comedy, and I love reading. And lastly, the thing that I think is most important is I've been trying very hard to surround myself with people that I want to be like, and usually people that are extremely enthusiastic and outgoing and just genuinely happy. Because right now, I'm not trying to be the best mixer ever. I'm not trying to be I am trying to be the best father ever to my kids. But more importantly, right now,
Amen to that, man.
What I'm trying to be is I have a hard time letting myself be happy. And I don't give a shit about money. I do not give a shit about accolades. I give a shit about being happy. And I am a penitent and humble seeker of happiness. I am trying to be happy because it is so hard for me. And I do my very best. And as long as I'm aware and I'm trying and I'm doing my shit and getting my shit together, I feel like I can be creative.
Amazing. I love it, man. It's a great answer. I actually there's a book called The Pursuit of Happiness that I read, or I think it was called The Pursuit of Happiness, and I read it in Japan when I was there. So
how long were you in Japan?
The full connection. I was there for a month with my wife. Yeah.
Hey.
I'll tell you more about it after we end the episode. Sorry. No, it's awesome. Yeah. It was amazing. It was a life-changing trip for us. So. But I have strong, fond memories of Japan. It was funny that you were talking about the pursuit of happiness, and literally picked up this book in a random used bookstore in Japan somewhere, and read it there. So
Book Off.
Book Off. Book. Oh, was it Book Off? I don't remember.
Yeah,
was
it Book Off? Oh, okay. The used bookstore.
We bought some hilarious stuff at one of these bookstores in Tokyo. Where it was it made no sense. It was these cartoons that are in English that just don't make any sense, and some of them are slightly inappropriate. So we hide them in the back bookshelf, so random people don't just find it. But it was great. Yeah. Well, dude, this has been so fun, DK. Thank you for taking the time to do this. I will ask you my final question, which everybody gets asked on the show, and it's just kind of you may have answered it already, but anyways, here's the question. So looking back on your journey, knowing what you know today, what would you tell your earlier self? You'd be like, yo, DK, keep at that. It's going to get you where you want to go. Or maybe, DK, quit doing that. It's holding you back. What would be that one piece of advice you tell your earlier self?
This is a great question. And I actually have a really solid answer for this because I think about this quite often. What I'm about to say, and I kind of introduce it the same way each time. My advice for that question for myself, and this not for me, but for everybody here, I think the best piece of advice that I can give in retrospect is much more profound than it sounds, is much more serious, and can make or break your career. But it sounds really simple. I wish I could tell myself, I wish I could tell everybody in the world, the importance of just having fun with it. Just have fun with it. Whether you're a writer, whether you're a producer, whether you're a mixer, you lose. And you become a worse engineer, you become a worse mixer, you become a worse father, you become a worse person if you stop enjoying it. So you have to do things because you enjoy it, and make sure that you work hard. It is a work. Continue to find ways that you can enjoy the craft. I can't think of better advice than that.
Wow, that's really great advice. Yeah, I think we get into this because it brings us joy, and then eventually it becomes a job, and then eventually that becomes annoying. And then when you're able to circle back to, no, this is fun and I really love this, then you can have a really meaningful and sustain like a good career and just, live your best life, So,
I don't mean to go on a tangent real quick, but in 2020, I mixed 1,000 songs. 1,000 songs. If you do the math, that's like 3 songs a day without taking any breaks.
How is that physically possible?
First off, systems and assistance, right? My wife was prepping sessions for me. The point is not to flex that. The point was I lost myself. Have you watched the movie Soul, where he gets into the zone and at the end there's the monsters that kind of forgot their purpose? That was me. In 2020, I almost quit music entirely. I thought that working at Starbucks as a part-time job was going to make me happier than continuing music. I was so distraught. I was so stressed out. That was not worth it. Granted, I got fucking good. That's good practice. But I sacrificed everything for it, and it was never worth it. It was not worth it. I think doing 1,000 mixes is worth it, but I think it's more worth it to take the time and do things healthy and sustainable and just have fun with it. It was a very painful time in my life, and that I learned from.
Yeah. Thanks for sharing that. Yeah, I think a lot of people are so eager to get those 10,000 hours in, so to speak. You know what I mean? But it's a marathon. It's not a sprint. You got to take your time with it, and you can't burn out all of your energy in the first 5 kilometers. So, take your time with it. It's a long journey. I think it's something that I've been working on this for a while, of just trying to enjoy the journey of not being upset that I'm not at these accolades yet. If they come, great. You know what I mean? But if you're in this for the long haul, it's about enjoying that, that steady pursuit of growth, playing that long game, as a podcaster, you play the long game of podcasting for a really long time, and all of a sudden you see how much you've done, and you have all this backlog of amazing episodes that somehow people are randomly downloading, and you do that long game, and I think Gary Vee talks about this. Like, people overestimate what they can do in a year, and they underestimate